Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to another session of the Cassandra Conference, the topics of climate change, especially with regards to health, migration, gender inequality, and armed conflict, and also at our answers to that. And our answers to that have been, amongst other things, the most important, perhaps, facet has been the adoption of local climate forums. Local climate forums, so that everybody can understand, are not something that we from Cassandra create. It's the opposite. We believe that there are already activists in local communities around the world, and it is their work that we seek to promote, to disseminate, and to support, and to help develop in the ways that they ask us to develop it. So they are always the people who control what is happening in their local community, and we are at their service when they need us. And we do that through science embassies, who are institutions and independent experts who can give certain expertise no matter what the subject, when and if those local communities require it. And then we're also looking at the question of science communication and how experts from all fields must learn how to communicate more clearly to the general public in order so that their knowledge can be really used to the maximum at the local community level. Now, in this session, we're going to look a little bit at the question of how Cassandra can expand in the future. So Cassandra started in 2021, and we were looking basically at the Mediterranean as a pilot area, because the Mediterranean on both shores unfortunately is a very true reflection of the global problems regarding, for example, migration, regarding armed conflict, as has been seen all too recently, for example, in Gaza, with regards to public health, both in the southern European part of the Mediterranean, but also the northern part of the Mediterranean. Health is becoming increasingly a more important and urgent issue, shall we say. And gender inequality, unfortunately, which is a facet which appears in the Mediterranean as it appears in any other region of the world. Then we began working after 2023 in Africa, and indeed, most of our local climate forums are now situated in Africa. They're also situated in Palestine, where we have three local climate forums, and also in places such as Jordan and the Yemen. But now we're going to discuss a little bit more about the Middle East. We're going to discuss about India. We're going to discuss as well about further development in Africa. And we're going to discuss the Americas. And accompanying me for this conversation, I'm delighted to welcome four very highly respected people who it is my pleasure and my honor to be able to collaborate with. So we have first of all with us MARWA DAOUDY. She's a PhD and an associate professor in the Seif Ghobash Chair in Arab Studies and a director of the academic programs at the University of Georgetown in the USA. And I'm glad to say that she's with us despite her daughter forgetting her book for school this morning, but she still managed to get here on time. And that's one of the reasons why we're so pleased that Maura is with us. I'm also accompanied by Ariana Rosen. Ariana works for the Instituto Nacional de Agua in Argentina, but she's also a senior investigator and she's also an activist in her own right. We also have Ikoli Eya, and Ikoli is the director of Eco Lab that is working in many countries of Africa directly with local communities. And lastly, but certainly by no means least, we have Nandi, and this is where I have to then pronounce his full name. Nandi, please apologize if I get this wrong, but it's his real name is Dr. M. Nandi Varman, but we all call him Nandi for short. So welcome to you all. Nandi is the Secretary General of the APSCC, which works a lot with regards to issues such as environmental issues and the issues that Cassandra tackle, but on university campuses in a large area of India itself. So welcome to all of you. And to the audience, I would say that I hope that you enjoy the conversation, but also that in the last half hour, you feel free to ask the panelists questions. You can raise your hand. I can see it on the second computer, which I have here on my right. And you can raise your hand and you can speak to the panelists directly and direct a question to one or all of them as you so wish. Just to get the ball rolling, I'd like to ask the first question to MARWA. And MARWA, from you are an expert basically on what we would call here the Near East. Some people would, I think, mistakenly call it the Middle East. But for example, questions such as Palestine, Syria, Jordan, that region, Lebanon, I believe as well. From your perspective as an expert in that area, what is, in your opinion, the single biggest risk if global climate initiatives such as Cassandra expand without sufficient local anchoring? In other words, what would be the results if we forgot our local community roots?
First, I want to thank you, Richard, for inviting me to this fascinating conference and also panel with my esteemed co-panelist as well. We call the region also Southwest Asia and North Africa, SWANA, to get away from this colonial abstract construct of the Middle East or the Near East.
I stand corrected and I apologize for the
No, I'm just saying this is a new trend. No, absolutely. And
Okay.
you did well to outline this. I would say for the SWANA region, what you do with Cassandra, which is to have these local chapters, is crucial because you need to know the lived-in experience of local communities, which have very specific experiences when faced with climate change. Their vulnerabilities are very context-dependent. When we talk about drought and, decades-long droughts, people adapt. They have their own means of resilience. They have their lived-in experience. They have their knowledge also. We can also think about the importance of local knowledge in building resilience, but also adaptation to climate change. So clearly, if you have only top-down approaches, which is traditionally, I would say, the perspective when you look at international organizations or those big COP conferences, there's a need to include all of these local communities and to give them agency in formulating what is the best solution for them as communities. And I see that also not only from this regional perspective. I think across regions, we have today experts on Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia, and there are commonalities here and common experiences that could be shared in terms of how do we enhance people's security and diminish, of course, their vulnerabilities when it comes to human insecurity, food, water, agricultural, etc.
Thank you. I mean, let me open the question up to the others. Ariana, you are one of our first contacts, and certainly by no means an unimportant contact that Cassandra have in South America. Obviously, Eurecat, which is the organization that I work with and which is the organization that began Cassandra in 2021, is a Spanish organization. It's a Catalan organization, but obviously we have a lot of links with Latin America. With regards to, in your experience, Argentina and perhaps as well beyond Argentina within Latin America, how important is the local community aspect?
Oh, well, thank you, Richard, for this invitation, and thank you for all my colleagues in this panel. It was a great experience being here in this conference. Thank you for the questions, and I would say that this is urgent. I love this idea when you call the attention to be here and get in touch and know better how this Cassandra works, this conferences works. Latin America in general, South America is suffering the same consequences of climate change, and these events are, being harder and unpredictable. And we are looking at the consequences of not taking action. So working with local people is essential, is extremely essential, because we need or urgent measures in order to keep people on the ground, not moving away because of climate migration and stuff. We need to look at new possibilities, new innovative technologies in order to reduce the risk and work the land and protect the water sources and make a better use of our resources we still have. So we cannot do this without having the compromises of local people. So these sorts of programs are really needed on the ground because it is, as you mentioned, it anchors the initiatives. It gives you, like Cassandra, another international initiative and national initiatives, and local as well. We need to have the compromises. We need to be neutral as political speaking. I think it's important to mention this right away because there is a lot of political shift in these days, and we need to go to the sound commitments of people. We need to be clear. We need to be transparent. We need to be really facing. And you mentioned before in the previous panels, be in a we need to feel what people feel. So that's what I think. We need to collaborate. We need to strengthen our collaboration within different organizations, and having such a project in our region, it is extremely crucial nowadays, and we need to start working all together. And I would like to mention things that came out to my mind during these conferences, is that we need to start thinking differently. It is urgent. It is time for changes. And I think such a project like Cassandra and others, we need to start considering that we need to be more efficient in our, managing our resources. There are scarce resources. And the resources that gets to the ground and works with people, they're scarce. Even though they mentioned there are a lot of money going around the table, the truth is, as it was mentioned as well, people don't have money. Budgets are reduced and they don't have much resources and budgets. So we need to be really efficient in managing what we have. And we need to start considering innovation in our institution. We need to open up to new ideas, to new cross-talk within different sectors and disciplines. It was mentioned before also, and I think I would like to take that again, is that we need new professionals on the ground. We need to start talking with each other, not only researchers towards the researchers, but also to have more communicating. It was mentioned before, the front officer. We need more than that. So that's my point. I will give the floor to other panelists, but I would like to leave this idea of innovation under the table. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks. And please, everybody, don't be polite. If somebody says something and you think, well, that's utter rubbish, yeah, please feel free to say so, because I guarantee that I will. Nandi, changing the subject just a little bit, but not really, but just a little bit to address what you yourself are so involved in. In your experience, you're in India. Climate action often intersects with campuses, with cities, communities. You represent one of the first organizations with whom we were in contact with in the subcontinent, in India. What entry points, in your opinion, should Cassandra prioritize to gain legitimacy and long-term impact in these regions? And I'm directing this to you to get a specifically Indian point of view from this.
Thank you, Richard, for this wonderful opportunity what you have given to me. And also, I thank all the panelists to be here with us. When it comes to India, it's totally different compared with other countries. We have different cultures. So addressing or taking Cassandra into the system is tapping their local traditional knowledge. Two things go hand in hand. The first one is in-compliance approach, which is totally belongs to the government. So government, they prioritize their rules, their acts, their protocols, so what they have mandated to be implemented at the grassroots level or at on the ground level. That is the first one. Automatically, if rather than seeking government support, if you hold on to this tool, definitely they will be on board by default. And the next one is when it comes to community or society, the tradition. Every region or state or province will have a specific tradition which is not available in other parts of the country. The strategy need to be slightly changed when you go from one region to the other region, but maybe the platform may be the same. So when you prioritize focusing on their tradition, which they are already inside that system or their native thing, it is easy for gaining momentum and also gaining importance for the initiatives what the Cassandra is taking. In addition to that, the participation is most important. First one is accepting a new concept, a new person or new concept into their system. And second one is participating in that new concept. So rather than something new or because rocket science won't work when it comes to community level. So their science, their tradition alone will work. So holding on to that, their tradition, it definitely will have a very good foothold for Cassandra to be on board and also for social acceptance. So both government part and the society part goes hand in hand. This two will definitely help out Cassandra for speedy acceptance and implementation of various programs also related to Cassandra.
Now then, something that you brought up there, which was made me think, was the question of ownership, and what we're discovering through our experience in Cassandra, and this incorporates already some things that some of you guys have already mentioned. And for example, so we have local climate forums, and we have meetings in English, which was the first language we started off with. But now we also have meetings in Arabic because we have sufficient local climate forums where the leaders only speak in Arabic or who speak better or express themselves better in Arabic. We also have local climate forums in French. And now, because we're developing towards Central and South America, we're going to also be having local climate forum meetings, principally in Spanish, but possibly as well in Portuguese soon. So language is very important. Ownership as well is important. And one of the things that we have found is that instead of artificially going into a community, I mean, I am 64 years old. I know I don't look it, but I'm 64 years old. I'm white. I'm bald. I'm a European. I come from a privileged part of the world. Okay? I mean, believe me, if I go outside into the street, everyone will complain about their problems. And Europe has a lot of problems, but we are privileged in many ways. I cannot go to a community, for example, in countries where I've lived, such as Afghanistan. I've lived in Afghanistan. I've lived in India. I've lived in Kenya. I can't go to people in those countries and say to them, look, what you've got to do is this, this, and this. No. So what we, from Cassandra, right from the beginning since 2021, what we've been trying to do is to say, look, there exist local activists. There are activists in all of the world. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Instead of us creating artificially an action, let us join forces and support, not tell them what to do, but support existing actions. And this is how we get into contact with our, what we call very generically, local climate forums. And coming to that, Ikole, you are somebody who has a vast amount of experience in being a local activist, but also working with youth-led initiatives across Africa and indeed beyond, because I know that you're also in Canada. in order to ensure that the local community are not the subjects of some sort of scientific investigation, that are not, shall we say, the toys of an external research program, but are in fact the owners and the creators and the instigators of a meaningful action for what is necessary for their local community. How can we really make sure that those local activists, what we call local climate forums, remain truly empowered, and that they are not abused by third parties from the outside who will use them simply for their research, and then once the research has disappeared, they will lose interest in that local group, which unfortunately happens all too often with funded research projects. Colleague, how do we ensure that our local initiatives, our local climate forums, always maintain the leading voice, that they are the decision makers?
Thank you very much, Richard, and my panelists, other panelists on board. I want to say that this is a very good question, because it's a topic that I've been working on over 7 years in Africa. And in most projects we have in Africa, it always turns out to be a similar situation. Of course, like some research being done, and the local people don't even have a clue on what's going on, and some decisions are being made from the top to be able to maybe extract some resources such as water, or maybe carry out some climate projects. And some of this data, which is very important for some large organizations, to be able to analyze some of this data to get more funding, or somehow to present facts, and then leave the community in some kind of wandering state. I believe Cassandra should focus more on to continue more on the same model, which is a bottom-up approach, by tackling specific local climate forum leaders in the areas with high problems related to climate change and water resources, by tackling training programs for these local climate forum leaders. Not only that, but for citizens. And I have to bring the point about citizens science, because it's very much important when it comes to leading a local initiative. You have to include the citizens, break down the scientific information in a way or in a pattern that can be translatable to these indigenes. They might not have the knowledge of all the mathematical approach or maybe physics, but there's a way I think Cassandra can channel this knowledge, and through its science embassies, it can help to pick out people that can communicate betterly in a better or in a more effective way to these local community leaders, that they can take up advocacy, not just by saying that, oh, we have a problem here, but they can actually know, I collected this data, I can understand what this data is and what I can use, or what is the impact of what I have as a data. That could be able to help strengthen more local forces, not just by reporting cases, but understanding why the case must be reported, and how we should move from not just reporting, but active intervention on ground. I think our approach in 2023, within the project we have in EcoLab, that's monitoring health and waste management and public health problems across 4 countries, including Cameroon, Nigeria, Zambia, Malawi, and Uganda. We try to work with the locals. Now, these are guys who don't have any clue. Some of them are not from the science background, but they can still be teachable. Talking about science or research is not just about I think maybe a rocket science. Is just something that we need to translate better in a kind of effective. And we had to get these guys, train them in a very compressed, or let's say a more effective way. And they were able to collect effective data translated to different risk categories, such as if we have, for example, a pollution area in your a location like water is being polluted, how do you report that? You don't just say water is being polluted, but you have to give a category that could be translated to say it is high. Why? Because there are certain pathogens or there are certain indicators that I myself, I can see. Now, this is observatory research. That is common for anyone to know, even just a farmer can understand this. I think Cassandra should focus on more effort on the citizen science build-up and data collection practices that could as well not have an impact on maybe information related to the community or cultural biases in local communities. I think from this point in, it can help. And just to make one point clear, we know that, of course, we are using AI. Every situation, maybe some reports could be translated from the local climate forum leaders. And this information could be in picture format, in videos, or maybe some kind of stuff, and translated to the leaders. And at the end of the day, we need to see how to also monitor the AI we are using to translate informations and to report back to get understanding of what we are trying to solve as a local climate forum or as Cassandra as a whole. I think that should be the way forward. Yeah.
I mean, clear communication is extremely important. AI has a role to play in that, absolutely. But clear communication to that local community is absolutely important. I would argue it's important always when that local community asks for it. Yeah. Instead of force feeding local communities, what we try to do is to say to local communities, look, we have a network of experts, which we call science embassies. They are there if and when you require an answer to a question. Okay. And we get questions. We've had questions about suicide. We've had questions about flooding. And what we try to do is to guarantee that within 24 hours online, they are in contact with experts, no matter where those experts or that entity may be in the world, giving them the necessary information which that local climate forum requires in that moment. Okay, let me provoke you for a bit more conversation. Oh, Ariana, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. No, I just would like to add that when we consider, or at least in my case, local communities, not only involves social communities, but also local governments. Because sometimes, or that occurs to me, that if you have an interesting project and you would like to, incorporate the community, you will have problems with the government, because sometimes government don't want to raise the voice or underline some certain problems, because it will cause problems to their own political issues or governmental stability. So I have heard many times that you don't want a project that land from external views, someone else outside your community. Nobody likes that. And we already learned that experience. So you need to go to the community through local leaders in order to understand the situation and then trying to find solutions that will accompany their own.
Permit me to be the devil's advocate. Okay, I apologize for interrupting, but I want you to answer me this. Who is worthy of more faith, shall we say, when it comes to guaranteeing, for example, in environmental issues? Climate change is an environmental issue which has social and political consequences. That's what Cassandra looks at, the social and the political consequences. Who is worthy of more faith? A politician who, in a maximum of 4 years' time, is going to look for re-election, and probably that'd be 2 years' time, or even maybe a year's time, yeah? Or a local community activist who is disinterestedly, okay, looking to improve the community where he or she lives. And my question is based on that. I've been a politician, okay? I've been a deputy mayor. I've been the mayor of a city here in Spain, okay? But I'm an exception because I'm a wonderfully nice person. And I said, I'm not going for re-election right from the start. And the reason why I said that was because it gave me then the freedom to create actions in a way that if I wanted them to continue beyond my mandate, I had to make sure that they were consensualized with the local society, because otherwise they were going to disappear the moment I went. So, should we contact the local governments who are more interested in party votes, or depending on the society, there is no party to vote and they're just named there by whoever happens to be the dictator of the time? Or do we trust, for continuity and for stability and for a message to the community, the local community themselves, who are not, shall we say, party politically or whatever that system may be, motivated? I'm asking, and I'm asking that to all of you.
I will answer first, and then I will lead the rest of our colleagues. That is extremely difficult, and it will depend on the situation. I worked in a project that voluntarily the government, local government, wanted to join because they understand the problem, and they said, okay, I would like to be part of this because I will promote the results of this project. Of course, we have the opposite. So it will depend on the situation and the activism within the community. I came across many times here around Buenos Aires in Argentina. We are very questioned about how we use agriculture products, for example, agrochemicals. So sometimes within the community, there is a lot of huge rejection towards the use of agriculture products. So who raised the voice? Our activism. And sometimes they don't want to hear other voices. And if, for example, researchers or the academia comes along and say, okay, this is not a problem, or this is a problem, and try to see the whole agricultural productivity, it's not easy to get to these people because they already have a very particular point of view and response to, agricultural practices. So it's not easy, and I think it will depend on the situation. I would say that we need to be, in general, neutral and try to get build trust from somewhere. It will depend on the situation. Maybe it's government, maybe it's the whole community. But in my case, as I represent the academia in a certain way, I'm a researcher, I think that the critical point of view of things and the more neutral analysis we can have of a different phenomenon or situation is from researchers. So in certain ways, scientists need to penetrate the social architecture, trying to, sorry, this is my point of view, but
don't apologize, it's your point of view.
Critical thinking. We need to help trying to see things from a critical point of view. So that means that it's not leaving aside local knowledge or traditional practices. Of course, everything is part of the conversation. But I think that we need to be very careful when we work within a community, trying to be the more neutral and transparent, but at the same time robust and with evidence-based results and data.
I mean, for example, with Cassandra, for example, and
exactly.
I mean, and I'm going to provoke all of you, so get ready, guys. Yeah, I mean, for example, Cassandra, we're dealing with migration, we're dealing with health problems, we're dealing with gender inequality, we're dealing with armed conflicts, and all of which we claim, and not only we claim, we can demonstrate, are exacerbated by climate change. They're not necessarily originating from climate change, but they can be certainly exacerbated. The effects can certainly be exacerbated by climate change. So surely, Cassandra, from the most objective intentions possible, we're being political. Because, I mean, first of all, we're saying, hey, climate change is a fact. That's political. In the US, that's very political. Yeah? If we're talking about gender equality, if I go to Saudi Arabia, that's political. Yeah? If we're talking about migration, hey, every single country in Europe, that's political. I'm delighted that yesterday the Spanish president has actually decided to legalize all the people without documents in Spain. Yeah, completely. Yeah, that's because the Spanish economy is booming because of migration. Yeah, but you go to, for example, Hungary and ask them about migrants, or you go to many European countries, for example, the UK, where migration is the major issue. So we are being political. I think anything that we do in the society actually will always be political because politics is just the art of taking a decision. MARWA, you raised your hand.
Yes, I wanted actually to say that we actually need to politicize the responses and the analysis of climate insecurities. And there's nothing about climate vulnerability that is apolitical, in my view. And being researchers and academics, we provide that critical, very important lens. It doesn't mean that the data, the findings are not done rigorously, the methodology is not applied very rigorously, but I think you cannot think about, in my view, and at least when I look at the Swana region, about the impacts of climate change without looking at the root causes of why these vulnerabilities are exacerbated, as you mentioned, Richard. It's about war, it's about ecocide, it's about genocide against people, it's also about maybe the policies that are implemented by the governments, which are flawed, which are also driven by ideologies, specific ideologies. There's also corruption. So in my view, there needs to be really a structural, holistic perspective, and politics cannot be avoided. It's all about politics. I'm a political scientist, but I think this is why climate security is so important from that perspective, from a critical climate security perspective. And I think the response is also, in my view, more effective. If you look at a community, for example, in a country which is war-driven or which is, standing in front of extractivism, etc., if you just look at the local level without taking the big picture, you cannot have effective responses. And in my view, saying that we want to have just a technocratic, response and approach is insufficient. And to go back to your question, I think activists have a role to play here. And I see it also in the region that I work on. You mentioned the politicians. Often international organizations tend to deal with only the central government and the politicians, ignoring local communities. But these local communities, through activists and youth activists and others, but also non-governmental organizations with credibility and constituency, could be the interface with the international community, with the regional communities, bringing those local communities' voices to the international arena and giving them agency, in my view. So the problem is the international system sort of forces to go through politicians and the central governments, but they're also hindering effective responses to climate impacts by doing that. There are ways to counter that. Yeah.
I apologize for the interruption.
No.
There were two fantastic quotes that came out of the conference yesterday. I can't remember who said them, but one person said very clearly when they were talking about the local communities, they said, if you are not invited to the meal, then you're on the menu. Yeah. In other words, if local communities just sit back, and accept that somebody is going to decide for them, then they're never going to be able to get what they really need. And somebody else said, I think it was Lesha Wittmer from the Women for Water Partnership. She said, if you don't have a chair at the table, then take a couple of chairs and just push your way in. Yeah. And that is perhaps the attitude that needs to be adopted more. Nandi, you were describing the situation in India and you were talking about the national government. To what point can local communities, they themselves, not stand up for themselves, but dictate what is going to happen within that community regarding the issues that we're discussing here today and yesterday?
Community in the sense, as the other panelists mentioned, the activists will be everywhere in every communities. So when it comes to environment and environment sustainability, the activist part plays a major role within the community circle. In addition to that, the politician role is also important, because when it comes to in-compliance approach, definitely the concerned department, the concerned officers, the concerned maybe the other inline departments will be involved or otherwise loop in into these sustainability initiatives. For example, when it comes to agriculture, because almost all regions everywhere, wherever it may be, it's related, more or less related with agriculture. So water department, agriculture department, they both have to come hand in hand with this. So in addition to that, when it comes to politicians role to play is they have different schemes for the benefit of the people, for the benefit of the communities, but it is not reaching down to the community because of various hurdles and and most importantly the time factor and the red tape, which is really, it's very hard in India to overcome, because bypassing
Indian
it
red
is
tape
impossible
is
to
pretty
bypass all those
proverbial.
things.
Yeah.
Of course we have,
Yeah, I
because
mean,
it is, we have to go through
yeah,
all those
I think it was the Indians who invented bureaucracy. They're absolute masters at it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I spent 2 years there, and I spent of those 2 years, I think I spent 6 months filling out forms when I was working there as a journalist many, many, many years ago. And I'm pretty sure it hasn't got better since then.
yeah, of course, even
Ariana,
today we have too many
Ari,
forms.
it's absolutely. Ariana, you talk about bureaucracy, and that's an interesting thing because one of the things that we try to emphasize with Cassandra is the question of simplicity, simplicity of action, simplicity of getting money to local climate forums directly without going through supranational agencies, without going through national governments. Get the money to the local community, literally send it to their bank account and let them use it. And we're talking sometimes about quantities of 500 euros or $200 or 1,000 euros. It's small amounts of money very often that make the difference, is what those local communities need, and that they can do so much with so little. Yeah. And yet it is very, very difficult if you work, and I've worked with the United Nations. I was in Nairobi for a year with UNEP. And, such small quantities, there was no way that bureaucracy was going to allow that money to get through in those small quantities. Yeah. Apart from the fact, and we could go into another conversation about the cost of these bureaucracies, full stop. But going back to the question of simplicity, what I wanted to also introduce into the conversation is this idea that Ariana said before about we must break down silos so that local governments need to work with everybody else and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And I'm not criticizing Ariana because I agree with her 100%. But I want your reactions, and here I'm going to be provoking all four of you, so I want your reactions here. I've been working in environmental politics now for 20 years, between being a politician and between being the head of politics here at Eurecat. And in that time, I have spoken at I don't know how many conferences around the world. And I have heard people speaking the same rubbish week after week, month after month, year after year. It's to the point where now, I mean, I can go to a conference and I can, when somebody starts a speech, I can basically end it for them. Yeah, because you've heard it so many times. And so often over 20 years have I heard, and Ariane, I'm not judging you at all. But so many times I've heard people rightfully saying we've got to break down the silos. But in 20 years, we haven't done any of that. Why not? That's my question, guys. Why haven't we broken down the silos? Why have we not achieved anything? We had Phoebe Konduri, who is she's one of these people who I admire professionally like very few others. She's an incredible economist, she's an expert, and she's responsible for reporting on the SDGs. And she herself said, look, we've achieved 20% of the SDGs. And I disagree with her in one thing that she said. She said, that's a fantastic result. I think it's a terrible result. That after so much public money has been spent on achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, we've only achieved 20%. Yeah, and with one country in particular, who I won't mention, but it's where MARWA is at the moment. Yeah, that, for example, has decidedly said, well, we're not even interested in this subject anymore. We're withdrawing from it. And they happen to be the biggest sponsors of the UN as well at the same time. So, guys, what are we doing wrong? Feel free to speak up. Ikori, what are we doing wrong?
It's quite interesting, actually. You know, it's the same thing. I think it still boils down to local penetration, because I think some certain bureaucracy procedures have really affected impact of certain projects. And then I think, in my opinion, I feel like there is some kind of maybe some kind of group or certain circle of specific top players in the field who always get along with projects, and then execution and monitoring and evaluation becomes weak along the line. And I think that's where some of the failures are coming from. Because if you look at scenarios or cases in Africa, particularly, you understand that, for example, let's say there is a fund that has been given to construct some kind of borehole projects or maybe tree planting. After this project is done, maybe there's a fund that was sent to a specific top player organization operating in Africa, and then there are some specific organizations that are linked to this top player, which are like local organizations that maybe their efficiency is not enough to implement certain projects, but because they are in this circle or this team, they will just have to pass on some of these projects for them to execute. And it doesn't mean that these organizations, the local organizations, really have the skills. They don't actually select or look or search for the right organization or players or activists that have the skill sets that is necessary for them to execute these projects. And I think the money at the end of the day will be used up, but no impact created. That is something that I've witnessed and see happening over the time, particularly in Africa. For example, we did the recent training where we organized globally, like in Africa and some other countries, where we're trying to train the youth and some local community leaders on how to track situations or problems in their community. And I was pretty shocked. There was a situation in Ghana whereby, of course, one of the participants carried out the research that we were doing. He presented the data, and for me, what I was shocked about was that community had about 20 households, but only one toilet available for 20 households. Now, this is not something that just happened, maybe, or it was just recently that we had this case. It is a community that has been living for ages, and there have been projects still happening. For example, funded projects or top players in Africa. Now, what is happening? Why are they not seeing such situations? There are countless of these kind of situations happening in Africa. Now, it's not the aspect of the money not available, because we know the huge amount of money spent on climate projects, on water projects every year in Africa, but yet there is no result. There is no impact. Still, we still talk about 1.5, 1.3 billion people lack access to water. Now, that's sustainable development goals has been over, going out, of course, let's say 2030, it's something over 15 years. And what have we achieved as a global force, as top players in the field? Is absolutely below performance, I could say, because 20% is not enough to quantify the amount of money being spent, particularly in Africa. It's actually, that's a problem. So first thing is about the efficiency of the players, some kind of bureaucracy. Third is about their political cycle, as maybe let me just say political cycle, or maybe group of people they know. It's like some kind of connection. And if, for example, let me just say an organization which is organization A, I will not kind of specify, is the top guy. He knows how to get the funding. And when he gets this funding, he or maybe this organization cannot implement this project like fully in the large scale. It's going to now connect to different local players that are part of the same cycle, the same mindset of how they can do their things and they execute. It doesn't translate transparency at all, efficiency of the workers, efficiency of the organization executing these projects. Those are some of the things affecting, and I think that's one of the challenges that we are having, that the SDGs, we are getting to 2030, and we still talk about lack of access of water, climate, whatsoever in Africa. Yeah, from my point of view.
Are we discussing here corruption?
I don't know, probably. Yeah.
Nandi's laughing. Nandi, are we talking about corruption? I mean, I'm not naming names, eh? Yeah, but are we discussing corruption? Nobody wants to answer.
Yes, we are. We are.
Thank you, Mal.
Yes.
Thank you for answering me. Thank you.
This is part of the issue,
everywhere.
right? When we think about the policies and the structures that are actually causing the vulnerabilities, corruption is one of the biggest hurdles to people's own human security, right? When we think about climate change. And how do we tackle that? Maybe we should make like investments in the country conditional on the money going to local communities versus going to bureaucratic structures. And this is where the interface with the local communities, with the NGOs, with the activists is very important in my view.
I mean, sometimes it's not corruption. Sometimes it's systemic failure. I mean, for example, I have worked for an organization that received money from nation states, and I can guarantee that 80% of that money that they was received, instead of going to the projects, was paying for the salaries of the bureaucracy in question. Yeah. So basically they were paying to employ people to theoretically do things, which afterwards, once their salaries had been paid, they didn't have the money to do. Yeah. Ariana, you brought up Ariana thinking, it's all right. I'm not going to ask you about corruption. You mentioned before silos. Okay. All right. So we do have these silos. I think we all recognize that. I mean, it's been said a million times. Okay. So Ariana, for example, in the South American context, where we're going to now be working actively, how do we get across those barriers? Because silos are barriers. I mean, silos exist all over the world. Professional silos, cultural silos, gender silos, you name it, we've got a silo for it. Okay, how do we get across that? For example, in the South American context.
Well, the only thing that comes to my mind in this moment, as far as I can see and experienced, is that networking is the first answer, a good response. You mentioned simplicity, but I say maybe it's not that simplicity. We need many different sectors working together, and we need to call for associations, local initiatives, local communities, and there you will have women, cooperatives, youth activism. So you need to have the widest diversity possible when you discuss a project. And for me nowadays, and as far as I can I have seen in my career, is that you need to train people to lead with projects. And as I mentioned, someone mentioned before the risks of the project. So corruption, limited resources, limited participation, all these elements are part of the risks when you evaluate a project to be implemented in a place. And you need to have people with the abilities to deal with these risks. talking with the people, with the local communities, or let's say trying to deal with the money and the transfer to local communities in order to, I would say maybe this is very naive, but avoiding corruption always is there, and government is complicated in many times. What I wanted to say is that as far as I can see, when you have a wide diversity of people talking in the table over the, representing different sectors, the conversation is more transparent, and you have all the different inputs, different needs of every sector. You need to start dealing with negotiation, trying to understand different points of view. So at the end of this ecosystem of points of view, you will have the possibility to implement a project agreed with many sectors and with an aim objectives. You need an objectives where people work together for that, to get that objective. So it's like a common good, it's a common agreement. And we need to start working, trying to get this kind of a scenario. I know that this is very naive in some way, but as far as I can see, when you have this possibility of different sectors working together, different disciplines that nourish the discussion and the point of view, and you can, understand what anthropologists say, or social people, or with a biologist. I am a biologist. That's why I wanted to, clarify if someone else mentioned something regarding politics. I am not aware of that. But as a technical expert, for me, it was really good to start knowing people from social disciplines or anthropologists, how to communicate. And we mentioned that before. We don't know that. We were not trained to communicate science, at least as far from outside, scientific community. So it's not easy. That occurs to me that I was trying to give a presentation, a training course to local people, local people, about water, how to use the water and water safety and drinking water quality and stuff. And we prepare a presentation, very neat, very specific, with good details. And someone from communications, social communications, they said, no, you forget everything. You need 2 slides and say, this is good and this is not good, point. And it was really difficult for us to accept that we give a lot of information that is nonsense for many people. So I think communication and having the possibility to open up to different points of view is really, really rich. And you need to encourage this behavior, this possibility to listen to different points of view. I think this is the basic of democracy, and this is the basis of negotiation. And we need to start thinking about projects in a different way. Thinking about the resources, thinking about not overlapping when you already have a project down on the ground. You need to open up to different disciplines. You need to be aware of the basic needs of people. Of course, we need people. People need to participate in the discussion, common, social, civil society. We need youth. We need disabled people. All the diversity in a community in order to make the project useful for everyone. And that's the point, and that's the end. That's why when I mentioned the government, everything is politics. What I wanted to say is when they have their own interest and not the interest is the common goods. We need to work for the common goods, reducing the risk, improving our productivity or development in a coordinated way with the common goods. Well, that's my point. Thank you.
And for somebody who claims that scientists don't know how to communicate, You're doing a very good job of communicating, Ariana. So it's obviously not all scientists. So Nandi, you wanted to say something? Or
No, no,
oh, okay.
no.
Okay. In that case, let me just first of all remind the audience that if you have any questions, we are open to hear you ask a question. I do mean ask a question, not speak for 15 minutes instead of the panelists. But if you do have a question or a specific question that you want to ask to one of our panelists or to indeed all of them, then please feel welcome to do so and we'll give you a voice. In the meantime, at the moment, there are no questions from the audience. So in the meantime, let me ask you, beginning with MARWA, but I'm asking all of you now, in your different regions. So Ikoli, who's in various parts of Africa, MARWA, who is in Swana, and I now know what Swana is, and I will proudly be using that sentence from now on. I will never ever speak ever again about the Middle East or the Near East. I will be talking about Swana. Ariana, you're in South America, okay, what we call in Latin America, where we are. And Nandi in India, but also we'll be extending into Southeast Asia. The question I have, to what extent is climate change considered to be, not by you yourselves, but by the people in your region, okay, and by the politicians, but specifically by society, let us say, is climate change considered to be a vitally important issue? I mean, you have an awful lot, everyone has an awful lot of issues, yeah, in this life. To what extent is climate change actually a political issue, or shall I say a social issue? MARWA, first of all.
It depends actually at which level of impact you look at. I think I've studied a lot the impacts of climate change on the farming communities, for example, in Syria in the last decades. They've been severely impacted by drought, and last summer was one of the most severe drought. It has cascading impacts, right? We're talking about water, acute water scarcity, which is compounded by quantity, but also quality issues because of the war, the impacts of the war, the impacts of drought. There's the collapse of the agricultural sector. So we're talking about food insecurity. So if you look at that level, they will maybe conceptualize it or think about it as this is part of the aridity, the drought that we experience in the region, which is increasing over the years, and we need to find solutions to it. And clearly, then the link with other issues, for example, the link that was made between climate change and conflict, for example, to them is bewildering because they think it's conflict which is exacerbating, but climate change did not lead to conflict or to uprisings or issues as such. So they will not provide that nexus, but they see the impacts on the different aspects that you outline in your conference, which is health, because we know that there are a lot of waterborne diseases such as cholera, which are back and they were eradicated. So they make the link with that. And I see it at the farmers level as something very acute and something which is about their livelihood and their survival, right? And that creates migration as well, because they tend to leave their communities to go to the urban centers to find work. And often they get uprooted. It's whole families. It's not just seasonal migration. So there are really cascading and very, very impactful effects on reconfigurating how these communities live, the urban-rural divides. So clearly there's a realization. Now at the government's level, I think there's a realization that they need to be taken, accounted for, like in terms of their response to climate change. And they will actually try to abide by the international sort of injunction to have like planning, to provide like mitigation responses, etc. So I think climate change is vital. The only thing, it might not be thought about as climate change. It will be about severe drought. It will be about water scarcity. It will be about the impacts of climate change on these communities. But also this will be translated to the regional and national level in the sense that suddenly we talk about this region as being a hotspot of climate change with all the cascading impacts. Just to give you an example, in Tehran, for example, in Iran, There's such drought that the mayor issued a warning a few months ago that they might have to displace all of the population of the capital, outside of the capital, because they were so facing such an acute water crisis. So there is clearly an alarm there, which is raised, and a realization by local, but also, I would say, political authorities about the danger of climate change. Are they responding to it effectively? I'm not so sure, but that's another question.
Colin, I mean, you work in a number of countries of Africa. Okay. Africa, obviously a lot of the local climate forums that we have within Cassandra are the results of concern about climate change. But in general, what is the feeling about climate change? And I repeat again, its social political effects, which Cassandra was designed to look at, because when people talk about climate change, they always talk about the environment. And what we wanted to know right from the beginning was, okay, it's an environmental action, shall we say, but it's going to have social and political consequences. For example, today in The Guardian, they were saying that when temperatures reach 2%, the world's economy will get to a point where they will have no recovery of the world's economy, which is a pretty bleak. Nevertheless, that's what they're already saying. So, Ikoli, in Africa, and I know it's very easy to talk about an entire massive continent, but in Africa, to what extent do you think people are aware of the dangers of and the consequences of climate change?
Well, I think it's all depends on the community. I think, first of all, it's about the mindset and lack of knowledge, or let me say knowledge in particular, because we talk about climate education. It's one of the main pillars to emphasize on the effects of climate change. And I can tell you that in many communities, the knowledge about climate change impact is very, very low, because we don't have more experts that can break down the climate scientific concept of climate change to the local people. I think that's first the barrier, where we have many communities, they can see drought, okay, but what happens after what amount of maybe atmospheric pressure or whatsoever? These concepts are challenging. And so for them, from my view, based on the community approach or initiative we are using down in Africa in different countries, is that we make sure that we get these community people to understand the concept of climate change, not just like maybe an event that can just happen just like that, but it's something that's a process. It takes time and builds up, and then we have the effect, like let's say like a volcanic eruption. So it's not just an incident that just can happen. So that's the first thing, to sharpen the minds of the community. But looking at the case in Zambia, where we had, I think in 2024, we had a very big issues related to drought. And there was we say national emergency in Zambia. And all farmlands, I think about close to 50 to 60%, if I'm not mistaken. I got reports from the guys down there in Zambia, and based on the photos they sent to me, like every crop that was planted within 3 to 6 months, in fact, there was no maize in the country. And this was a kind of a tense pressure from the government. And at that point, it's like seeming to be real, because farmers at the point of their own livelihood, they are in between life and death, right? Because, for example, I'm a farmer, I need to get maize, I need to sell my kids to school. And then you happen to plant this season, and you're hoping to have money to, live a better life, and then you see a very massive drought. I think it was traumatic at the moment in Zambia. And for me, I feel like different parts have these kind of incidents, cases. Another example is in Uganda, where it was not drought, it was actually a massive flood that killed over 20 people. We posted that news on our website. It was actually horrible, because the whole village was swept out, including homes, and this led to migration. And farmlands, like we have animal most of them, like people that have a lot of connection related to farming activities, had to move from that village completely. Now, this is not just one person moving, it's the whole family leaving a village because they are at the verge of life and death at the same time, and no properties, everything swept out. So it's kind of an emergency that we really need to put up about the climate change education, because it's one of the things, not only about telling them about the effect of climate change, but how to adapt. Because it's one of the things that, I don't know, because based on my research and studies, of course, like I have a lot of like climate documents, climate, handbooks of some different organizations that could build some kind of strategic approaches. But these approaches are being built for experts, not for the local community to digest and understand how to build those barriers themselves. That is the knowledge gap, very big one. And to have those experts that can translate this complex methodology and approaches to local communities, and then have what we call the hands-on field approach to stop some of these climate mitigation effects, it's very limited. These experts are not found, as you may see. And it's just like a few of them could be hosted and just having conferences. No, they love having conferences. And that's some of the things I think Cassandra should focus more, not only just about conferences, but about seeing how to build a kind of a manual that could translate this hands-on practical approach in tackling this problem. It's not just about conferences, because conference can come, yeah, we can talk about it, we can educate the people. Yeah, oh yeah, we know when there's a high sea level rise or there will be flooding, okay, and what next? What can we do? Now, these things need to translate beyond the classroom or conference level to the field. Let them see how they can protect these things. I think that's the point we can see from there. Yeah.
Absolutely agree, which is why Cassandra in 2021 started as a conference. And in 2021, sorry, and then in 2023 it continued as a conference. And as a result of those two conferences, that's when we formulated our three actions, which are the promotion of the local communities, the promotion of science embassies, and then the influencing of national and international academic authorities, so that experts are taught to communicate clearly to the general public right from the beginning. Those are the three actions that we do. Cassandra, like any, and there are, as I said before, there are thousands of initiatives such as Cassandra around the world. It doesn't pretend to try and solve all of the problems, but to try and at least make inroads in three specific aspects. And probably the most important one is the promotion of the local community, as opposed to artificial citizen engagement that's been very much to the fore since then. Very interesting to what you were saying. And Nandi, with regards to India, I mean, for example, both MARWA and Ekoli have mentioned the issue of migration. In India, I worked as a journalist in India, but it was 40 years ago, so I think things have changed. But I remember then that if there was migration, it was basically from rural areas to urban areas on a temporary basis to make money and then to go back to the rural areas. Is migration an issue in India at the moment?
Yeah, migration for the sake of job is not an issue, but at the same time, migrating for resources is an issue, because usually the people from resource lacking area, they may move towards the areas where the resources are rich. So the community who is governing those resources or present in that community, I mean, in that location, they won't entertain things like this. When it comes to climate change, the erratic monsoons, drought, and double cyclones, flood, and depleting natural resources are root cause for various issues in a country like India. It is tackled at various fronts, but yet it's not fully tackled. Nobody is able to achieve, of course. The main thing is people. It should go to people. It is not going to people, and the people should understand the climate change is real. Majority of the people who are going to a school or otherwise college, they are able to understand that there is a real issue concerned with environment or biodiversity loss or climate change, which we call it as triple planetary crisis. So they realize that. But when it comes to the older people or older generation, I mean the elderly people, they are not able to realize certain things. So they think that everything is intact and things are going on in a proper manner. But it's not
Do you
so.
think that? Do you think
So
there's
the main
any
thing is,
ability? Sorry to interrupt you, Nandi. Just to pick on something you said there. Do you think that, for example, the older generation, is it that they don't understand that climate change is happening, or is it because they think, well, I don't care because I'm not going to be here? Do they see it far away in the future?
no, the older generation, they are not able to understand climate change, what exactly is. So they think that it is a seasonal changes, whatever is happening. Maybe some a week or a month is either preponed or postponed, the seasonal variation. But the climate change is totally, from our perspective, it's totally different from their perspective.
Yeah.
So according to them, it's not that very important. But for us, we know one rise in temperature will totally, destroy the coral and other things on the coast. But these people are not able to understand that. But the younger generation, they are packed with more information and more knowledge because of, I thank this SDGs, because only because of this SDG and enforcing that SDG at all level, the people, not only people, but also the officials, the government officials, the politicians, they are able to understand certain things. Otherwise, definitely it is impossible for the people like like Indian politicians to understand and implement schemes. And majority of the schemes nowadays, majority of the schemes are focused on touching any one target or otherwise one sustainable development goal. So every department or every ministry have taken hold of one goal which is relevant to that ministry, and through they are developing scheme based on the targets. So they are trying to implement it at various fronts. Of course, delays will be there, but anyhow, SDG had opened many doors, many doors. That's really a very good thing which we can see in India. So climate change, academic institutions.
No. Sorry, Nandi.
Yeah, academic institutions play a major role in climate change. I mean, climate change, by bringing awareness on climate change to the students and also to the other community people. So many activities are going on. And the thing is, documentation of exactly what they are doing and also promoting that on a right platform. So that is lacking. The right platform, in the sense, for example, Cassandra, the agenda is not to implement Cassandra's concept. Rather than the Cassandra's motive is to bring their talent out, or otherwise their program out to the public. So that is the most important thing which I like in Cassandra. And this will help the people to showcase their activities in either as a small forum or otherwise a regional forum. So it is easy for them to showcase. When they showcase, when they receive recognition, or otherwise it is cited in various article or journal, whatever it may be. So definitely these people will tend to do more. So Indian mindset is, if they receive recognition, they will give more. So not only India, but of course it is everywhere. So that recognition, if it is tapped properly on a proper platform, definitely we could, not 100% we can achieve, but to some extent we can progress and achieve our targets.
Okay, so I look forward to working with you on that in the coming years. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Ariana.
of course.
No, absolutely. Ariana,
Yeah.
in
Well,
Argentina, what is the level of awareness? What is the level of, shall we say, anxiety with regards to climate change?
Well, anxiety, we do have anxiety. I tell you that at least in Argentina, we have that 70% of our land is under arid or semi-arid condition. Only the 30% is in the more humid part. And of course, we are suffering the extremes even more and more in a more severe way. So people are aware. We suffer from very severe droughts, as long as very severe with lots of death and infrastructure loss, and because of floodings, very severe floodings. So we are aware in general, and as we are an agricultural country and we depend on agricultural goods, not only for our for food security, but also for as a commodity, we need to have a good agricultural products. And as long as we don't have much water, because glaciers are melting down, and we are not having enough water flow in our rivers, and it's reducing. And apart from that, we depend on hydropower source of energy. So our infrastructure, water infrastructure and water security is fragile. So we know those things. And I tell you, there are really good initiatives from the academia and research project, and as well as government in the provinces. Some provinces are really compromised. So they implement really good projects on the ground in order to reduce the risk of climate change. And people in general know about climate change. I tell you, the only thing that I see is this governmental shift we have in some countries. Sometimes climate change and other issues are in the agenda, and sometimes they are not. So when you have this sort of, extreme shift, if you have a good projects and good initiatives, and you need to keep those, mitigation and adaptation projects for a long time as a state policy, they are cut down, and they are not longer provided or supported, or supported economically and also socially. This is, I think, is the big threat for fighting climate change. I can tell you this right now because I'm seeing that this is something that is going on here in this country. But in general terms, we have good laws implemented. We have a law on climate change, and there were some social consultation in order to improve good measures. So some governments or the political functionaries of the government, they had good projects and implementation before, and I think this is a big risk. But people are really aware of that. People recognize the effects. We are having more, increase in temperature in general, and with the yes. I will stop here, but I think this is the situation, and I will join what Marwa said before. This is a cascading effect. So when you see that something going on the ground, you perceived all the consequences: employment, reduction in the incomes. Sometimes you need to move away, not migrate, outside the country, but we see that there is a huge movement from rural areas towards the city and urban areas. And this is a problem as well, of course. So I will stop here, but I think this is the problem. That's why we need to work, coherently and in different levels to tackle climate change in different ways.
If there's one thing, Ariana, if there's one thing that you would ask of Cassandra, which is an initiative, but it has its limits, what would you most want Cassandra to see to achieve in the next 2 years in your regional context?
Well, I would like to see more projects on the ground, more, as I said, coherent way of working. We need to have this umbrella using other associations. We have many associations that gather universities in different levels, national or local universities. We have associations about water institutions or water-related institutions, all combined under different associations. So Cassandra will help to glue all these initiatives for people working for protecting the water sources or the environment, or tackling climate change. So we need more actors, we need more stakeholders in order to distribute, make that more democratic, to have the voice of many different points of view in order to get consolidate the architecture in order to protect a project. That's what I mean. And having different voices for me is like protecting the project, accompanying, going all together towards a one aim. So I think, and I see Cassandra will help to act as an umbrella, giving us the possibility to gather all the voices of the people, associations, universities, government, common social communities, to start discussing about how we do things. And as I mentioned before, I think it is a time that we start rethinking how we do things. Maybe we can reframe, train people to think differently in an innovative way. We need to train people within the organizations to innovate in the way they work and they communicate, the way they produce ideas. And I tell you one thing that I would like to mention here, because I am really proud of this initiative, is I am part of, not because I am designing it, but I am part of a project that designed a biosensor that can detect lead. It is plum box, and everyone can access that information. The researcher that came to this idea and designed the idea is from molecular biology, and he was dealing with cancer problems. And suddenly he said, okay, I'm working at the in a research institution, but I won't see the results. I won't see how my research is affecting common people, even though he's working in cancer research. And on the other hand, there were some people from physics that they needed to, something connected to quantum physics or whatever. And they came with this idea of why don't we use this technology we have, this transforming bacteria stuff, in order to detect pollutants, water pollutants. So they came with this idea and they designed different formats of this biosensor. So what I wanted to stress here is how people from different grounds come together in order to solve a common problem. And nowadays we are discussing this with hospitals, with with technicians, with nurses, with teachers at the university, at school. So we are discussing water issue because of this biosensor. So this is a very nice idea where when you start considering things from a different point of view, trying to have people from different backgrounds in order to solve a problem, very nice and interesting and innovative things come up. And we need those technologies in order to start solving problems.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you, Ariana. MARWA, I want to give the last word to you. That in your region of speciality, I mean, you're from Palestine, you're a Palestinian. From the region
also. Palestinian and Syrian as well.
Oh, Palestinian and Syrian. Okay, so from the whole region that you're interested in, your work is based on, an initiative, and there are many like Cassandra. What would you expect from us? How could we help the work, for example, that you yourself do, with regards to that region? How can Cassandra be of use?
So I think the report you wrote on Palestine, which I read, is very helpful in creating this interconnection, the nexus between climate change, you put on health as well. For example, the focus on Gaza, what is happening in Gaza. The health sector was completely demolished. It has, again, cascading impacts, right? Waterborne diseases, children not having access to clean water, adults as well, in addition to displacement, in addition to armed and the ecocide, the genocide that is happening. So I think this local focus is extremely important in outlining how the human insecurities that come from climate change are compounded when there is armed conflict, when there's bombardment, in addition to looking at the rest of the region as well. You know, when the region becomes a hotspot, it means extreme drought. It means extreme temperatures. It means people are dying from heat. Actually, in Iraq, last summer and 2 summers ago, it was over 50 degrees Celsius, the temperature.
Sure.
And people don't have AC, etc. So what Cassandra can bring is this local focus, this light on what is happening, the bottom-up approach. But I had a recommendation, actually, and I agree with Ariana's point about the need for interdisciplinarity to really bring like rigorous research and data on what is happening. But I think because you have those different local chapters, and even though the contexts are different geographically, culturally, politically, to have a cross-regional perspective as well.
Sure.
What can we learn from Africa? For example, the local chapter in Africa, what can we learn from India, from Latin America? And lessons could be drawn and applied across the different contexts. And I think Cassandra would be in a very good position to do that because you have those local forums and local chapters as well.
I think that's a very, very clear message and an excellent message to finish this session on. I want to thank the audience for being with us, but above all, obviously, I want to thank MARWA DAOUDY for joining us and successfully, despite her kids' book trauma this morning. Thank you very much for all of you, for your input and for your extremely interesting perspectives. Ariana, it's always a pleasure to listen to you and look forward to working with you, not only in Argentina, but beyond. Nandi, as always, it's a pleasure to hear you and your input from India. And Ekoli, we've already been working together for a while, but I look forward to really developing what we're doing with you in the various African countries that you work in. I want to thank all 4 of you for being here. You represent 4 very diverse but extremely relevant regions. Basically, every region in the world is relevant to what we're facing as a global crisis, among many other crises which sometimes steal the headlines from this issue. But this is an issue that will not go away. If we don't address it, it's not going to disappear. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if war breaks out or if war doesn't break out. Climate change is still going to be there, and it's going to affect our life in every possible social, political, and economic dimension, as well as apart from the environmental effects. So thank you very much to you. Thank you to all of the speakers who've been participating so far. I'm now going to leave us in the hands of Anam Saryani, who is really the co-founder of Cassandra. She's a former colleague of mine when I was at UNEP. She now works for UNEP in New Delhi in India. So she's actually in the same country, in the same time zone as Nandi at this very moment. And there she is. She's actually from Kenya, but I think it's been 3 months now, Anam, that you yourself have been in India. And I will leave you just to say to the audience that at 7 o'clock Central European time, we have the very final act of the Cassandra conference. It's going to be a live face-to-face debate, but it's also streamed online. And we are accompanied by Andrea Costafreda, who is the Director General of Development Cooperation at the Department of the European Union of the Catalan government. We have Hakim El Haite, who is the former Minister of the Environment of Morocco, but even more importantly, was the chair of the Paris Agreement of the SDGs. We have Merdi Jomar, who's the former Prime Minister of Tunisia, and we have Tanya Miskova, who is the Ambassador at Large for Water to the UN from Slovenia. And they will be discussing, with regards to climate, water and gender, the transformative leadership which is necessary for a just transition. And I will also be there as the one provoking them, hopefully with extremely uncomfortable questions to these eminent politicians. So on my behalf, I will say goodbye to you. Thank you, Ikole, Nandi, Marwa, Ariana. It's been a pleasure and I look forward to working with you in the future. Anam, hello. And I will leave the conclusions of the day to you. Okay. And say goodbye.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you all.
Yeah.